Hey everybody, so last year on a trip to Texas I got the opportunity to meet up with Jason Lee and shoot an interview with him. We talked about film photography and the importance of printing your photos, and I really think in this digital age that printing is an important thing. You know, the tangibility and the physicalness of a print is something that just cannot be recreated with digital. So without further ado, here's the Jason Lee interview.
Jason Lee, skateboarder, actor, photographer. In the early skateboarding days up in San Francisco, we were using a lot of Super 8 cameras, the occasional Polaroid cameras. And so I was interested in film at that point, but it wasn't until the early 2000s that I started buying cameras of my own in terms of stills, you know, 35 millimeter and medium format and stuff like that. That came about because I had done some movies as an actor, and then I was on set one day and it just dawned on me that there were cameras around, you know? Because you're usually so kind of focused on what you're doing as an actor, and then the crew does what they do, you know? There's always good relationships and a lot of goofing off on set, and it's a lot of fun, but I don't know that a lot of actors really pay attention to the technical aspects of what's happening on a set. And you know, I knew about Super 8 cameras. I had shot a bunch of Super 8 film, and then one day I just started talking to the camera assistants. You know, what are the lenses? What kind of film stock is it? You know, what's going on with all these different lights, and then I just dove into it. I bought a Bolex Super 16mm camera and started playing around with that. I bought a Leica M6 and an RZ67 and just dove headfirst into it. And that was about 15 years ago, and it's been my passion ever since. 35mm has sort of been my go-to over the last all those years, I think. More in the early days, I would shoot the RZ. And in those early days, it was a lot of sort of experimenting, you know, with lighting and portraits and testing out different films and pushing and pulling film and different filters. There was a lot of experimenting in those early days. And so the Mamiya would either be on a tripod in a studio setting, or, you know, I had the grip. And then eventually I started kind of going out and roaming around and shooting photos, more of kind of just life as it was happening. And so that was the M6, and even point and shoot cameras and stuff like that. And then I got an 8x10 camera and started shooting 8x10 Polaroid film out on the road. Back in 2006, I took my first road trip with that 8x10 camera right there, and started kind of just documenting a lot of the stuff that you see with the new series on 8x10 Polaroid film, which required getting a hand crank processor, because it's two separate sheets of film, the 8x10 Polaroid. So you put the film holder in the processor with the positive piece in the film holder, and you crank it through the rollers. The tab grabs, it spreads the chemicals, and then you peel it. And then I'd hang from a clothesline in the back of my car the 8x10 prints to dry. And so that was my first kind of experience traveling and looking around with kind of photographer eyes in a way. And it was with the 8x10 camera and 8x10 Polaroid film, ironically, and not 35. That would come a little bit later. I never pre-visualize, no, especially yeah, I just don't. I don't, especially when you're out and you're driving and you're just kind of looking around. Something will stop you. The lighting, you know, a building, or the shadows, or just some kind of mood. You feel some kind of mood or some kind of scene looks interesting. Stop, get out, open up my lens, light meter, you know, dark cloth, the whole deal. That's with the large format. 35, you might stop because of that same scene, but you might shoot it from a few different angles, and then you might kind of start walking down the sidewalk and see if there's anything else. or in cities, you know, you're shooting a lot, I think, because there's so much going on, you know, it's so spontaneous. For this series, the large format Texas photographs, I did revisit a few spots because of getting film back, and there might have been a light leak or something, you know, with the film, and kind of going back to those areas anyway. And so I'd write down in my notebook, I want to, you know, try to get that shot again. Mostly it worked. On one occasion, the RCA shot, that very empty downtown shot with the old RCA sign sticking off the side, I went back to that town again and it was chock full of cars randomly. Yet when I had gone there the first time, it was very desolate, very empty, very eerie. But other than that, I had shot a 3000B with my land camera of the Ken's Liquor photo, the night photo from the new series. It has the neon trim on it. It's a drive-through liquor store and it's got a Ken's Liquor sign. I was up that way on a road trip out to California a couple years ago, and I had shot the drive-through portion of the building on 3000B, which ended up in the last book. So it'll be kind of neat to see two different films, two different periods, two different publications of the same location. But usually not, I usually don't revisit. I prefer conventional film, but one of my favorite films is Polaroid 664 or 54 or 804 as the sizes go up. Basically, when I had bought the RZ67, I was using the Polaroid back, and I was shooting a lot of Polaroid 664, the 100 speed black and white, and I absolutely loved it. It had like a charcoal-like kind of the grays. It was for instant film, I thought the quality is incredible. A lot of it probably had to do with the fact that it was being exposed through really nice Mamiya glass. And then I thought, I wonder if if they make this in bigger pieces. And I found out that they made it in 8x10. So I bought this Century Universal on eBay for 400 bucks about 13 or 14 years ago with a 210 millimeter Wallensack wide field lens, which I used for everything that I've ever shot 8x10 Polaroid. And then just loved it. It's one of my favorite films, 804. Sad that Polaroid is no longer, but I believe Impossible Project recently bought Polaroid, so we'll see what happens there. The stock that I have here is the remainder of my stock. I'd say of the boxes I have, I'd say about 50% of it's is gonna spread, and the other 50% I will shed a tear over. But once that's gone, it's gone. Yeah, it's sad to see Polaroid is gone, but it's special. But to go back to your question, a lot of it too was that it's the one-off factor. It's a one-off print that comes essentially from the processor right from the camera. I do not believe film will die out. If film did die out, I would just cut plates and make liquid emulsion and do the collodion thing probably. Photographer that I probably first saw that I thought was interesting was Joel Sternfeld. He has a book called American Prospects, and he's of that early school of color photographers. And then William Christenberry. I think you kind of go through for me anyway, and Ansel Adams is certainly somebody to respect immensely, but I think you go through the names that are kind of immediately accessible to you because they're very popular. Stieglitz, Steichen, Ansel Adams, where photography is kind of on an art level, which is where they wanted it to be. And so I was naturally interested in that and still very much respect that. But I think when I saw Sternfeld and Christenberry, I was somehow more drawn to that. Where it was just photographs of things as they are without much manipulation, and where you're sort of essentially asked to value a photograph that others might just say, well, it's just a photograph of a car in a driveway. What's so special about that? I thought that that was kind of interesting early on. And then I went, in 2007, I went to the Henry Wessel retrospective at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And when I saw these prints similar to that, it kind of validated that my instinct to kind of just go out and find odd things in nature, or it kind of validated that for me. But yeah, I think I was just kind of drawn to it as anybody might be, even if you weren't a photographer. There's an 8x10 color Polaroid that I shot of an Exxon sign that's back in 2006, I think, that's just in the middle of a dirt field. I think anybody would be on a road trip driving by that and go, why is the sign still there but the gas station's been torn down? But somebody left the sign, it's not been stolen, it's not been vandalized, it's not been tagged. And it almost becomes a part of the landscape, this Exxon sign, and it makes it that much more interesting and exciting. So somehow, instinctively, I was kind of drawn to sort of these leftover things or these kind of odd things in nature. And seeing the Wessel stuff and the Christenberry stuff, it kind of validated that instinct was maybe right. I have stuff kind of mapped out for the next 4 years, projects that I'd like to work on. A couple books, a couple new series, where I go back to 35, I go back to 120 film, 6x7. Hopefully do some books from those series, yeah. So hopefully, if all goes well, I'll be working on projects through 2020. Well, I'm okay with it for a couple of reasons. One, my base is film. I'm using film, I'm exposing film, I need to know about film. The tangibility of film, it's real, it's something that you can touch, it's something that you can hold. For this first run of prints, they're pigment inkjet prints, which means scans are required. But the quality of the prints is pretty amazing. It's archival, and the film is very, very much felt. You can see the grain, and you can see what I did in the camera with the film. So I'm okay with that. Similar to, I guess, you know, we were talking about earlier, a film like No Country for Old Men. It's shot on film. It goes through a digital process. And then before digital projection, it used to go back to film, right? Maybe it still does in some cases for cinemas that still do film projection, but it starts with film and then it goes through all kinds. Motion pictures go through a ton of digital manipulation. But the tangibility, that density, will definitely still be felt. And then, you know, we make books, so we have to scan the photos to then make books. For those of us who post film photos on Instagram, that requires scanning. So there's plenty of reasons to be okay with it. For me, the base is film, and that's what ultimately matters at the end of the day. Yeah, if it's darkroom printing, if it's archival inkjet printing, yeah, you had actually brought up earlier that you know of people that never print their stuff. I don't know what that would be like. So you're basically saying from phone to computer, to email to family member or something. There's no paper involved, whether darkroom or otherwise, anywhere in between. That's a strange thing for me, yeah. A friend not too long ago was telling me about his computer having crashed, and he lost all digital memories of the birth of his first daughter. I think it's cool that people make zines. I love it. Anytime there's a photographer that I follow on Instagram that has a zine or something, I always go to their big cartel or whatever and buy it. Absolutely support that. Any kind of printmaking of photos is cool, especially when people are doing it themselves. And I've seen quite a lot of good quality zines through the Instagram thing.